While it is important to dish out as much damage as possible, often people forget about developing a solid defensive strategy which puts you in situations like this. So I found the 10 most important defensive hacks which you absolutely need to learn so you can crush anyone who dares to try these disgusting backshots against you. We are going over everything from setting up your controls, learning how to properly guard, and even the best way to counter a counter. Be sure to stick around until the end of the video because I'll be revealing an awesome way to deflect a super attack from your opponent. Without further delay, let's dive into my top 10 defense tips to make you truly untouchable in Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. So your controller setup can be the difference between getting steamrolled and mastering defense within Sparking Zero. So let's have a look at the most important controls in your controller. You can start by choosing standard controls or classic controls. Both have their own pros and cons, but in terms of defense, I think standard controls are way more effective. Standard simplifies all of the defensive moves by reducing your inputs to a single button, like pressing circle for perception, instead of multiple buttons which you have to press on classic mode. Keeping things simple, I prefer to go with standard controls. Now, one key one that you need to disable is guard assist. Now, while guard assist is helpful, it does interfere with the timing of your guards as it prioritizes basic blocks over advanced counters like Z counter. So it can leave you vulnerable as it stops you from pulling off critical defense maneuvers when you need them the most. Now, similarly, revenge counter assist is something that you're also going to want to turn off. While it does try to help, it ends up draining your skill points way faster than normal, thus making you less equipped for more tough situations later on in a fight. The only one that I don't really have an issue with leaving turned on is recovery assist, to be honest. Another thing you may want to do is to change your character switch button to the D-pad, so I've got it set to the left directional button, as well as the transformation fusion button, set it to the upwards D-pad instead of the L3 and R3 buttons. Okay, so the next point, you want to master the basics of guarding if you want to survive in Sparking Zero. So the most important button you need to know for defense is holding R1 or RB on the Xbox controller. You can block most attacks that come your way, but however, blocking isn't a one-size-fits-all strategy as you have to stay alert for opponents who attack you from the sides or even from behind. Opponents are able to hit you from high or low, so you need to match their stance by guarding high or guarding low depending on how they attack you. Blocking is not foolproof and there are some unblockable moves, and some opponents are even able to grab you while you're guarding. In general, guarding is a great way to feel out your opponent's rhythm and to counterattack when the timing is right. So it's important when to know how to guard and then switch up into a Z counter or even with perception so that you can do things like sonic sway. Another important tool for defense is the perception stance, and this is your go-to for advanced defensive tactics. So by holding circle, you can enter perception, which is a defensive stance that allows you to counter rush attacks. So you hold and wait for your opponent to attack and you do the perception and then counter attack them. Now, if you time your perception perfectly, then you can elevate this counter into a sonic sway, as you're not only deflecting your opponent's moves, but you're also depleting their ki. This stance lets you turn the tables on a very aggressive opponent as you regain control of the fight. The sonic sway is perfect at interrupting combo-heavy opponents as it lets you slip past their attacks with a stylish dodge. You can find it useful against rapid attack chains as it gives you room to breathe while you plot your counter-attack. While perception is powerful, it does have its limitations. So you gotta make sure to disengage from the stance, especially if your opponent is switching to high-speed movements or they're targeting you with unblockable blasts. Perception combined with sonic sway is another very important skill to practice and master if you want to level up your defense in Sparking Zero. Next, we have some advanced guarding techniques which allow you to directly guard mid, high, or low position attacks, making it possible for you to counter some of the toughest moves in the game. The directional guarding is essential when facing very skilled opponents as it helps you to prevent them from landing powerful unblockable attacks. So it doesn't require that much timing, all you gotta do is just hold the up and the R1 if you can see that they're going to attack you from above. So this is how you do the high guard, and the low guard is just as effective as you predict your opponent's move and you minimize the damage that you receive. So while a high guard is great for countering aerial or overhead attacks, a low guard is perfect for sweeping kicks. You can see if you try your mid guard on a low guard attack, then your guard is broken and it gives your opponent an opportunity for a follow-up attack. So you gotta make sure that you you effectively use low and high guard in battle. So mixing your guard positions, you'll keep your opponent guessing as to what your next move is, and it's going to make them play less aggressively and be more cautious against you. Mastering these directional guards will make you very formidable, and it's an important skill to learn if you want to get good at this game. Sparking Zero has taken defense to the next level with the ability to super counter. This is a critical technique that you need to learn in order to turn the tide of battle, and this is especially if you're under attack from those devastating backshots which have a lot of people struggling. So super counter allows you to break free from your opponent's relentless attacks as you perfectly time your counter in order to neutralize their combo. This is going to require a lot of practice. It's really hard to effectively do the super counters at first, but once you've got the timing down, then they're really easy to execute one after the other. After mastering super counters, you'll be able to get out of those back shots really easily and flip the tables on your opponent, because effectively landing a super counter gives you a chance for a follow-up attack as you can rush into your opponent, as instead of them putting the pressure on you, it's you who is now in control of the flow of the fight. Again, like I mentioned, the thing about super counters is practice. You're gonna have to practice to get good at these, but if you spend a bit of time within training mode, it's honestly going to really pay off, especially in those ranked fights where people are spamming backshots against you and they're really hard to evade. Even in practice mode, it's really hard to actually effectively land a super counter. With enough practice, the super counter will allow you to anticipate all of these back attacks and allow you to counter them with precision. And again, if you're developing your defensive skills in this game, super counters are essential. Next, we have one of my favorite counters, and it's the Z counter, and this is genuinely one of the most effective ways to dodge attacks from your opponent. A well-timed Z counter will allow you to teleport out of harm's way just as your opponent's move is about to connect, leaving them open for a counter attack. This attack is essential if you want to evade against melee attacks, as it makes it a staple for defensive players. Now, Z countering isn't free as it does consume your ki, so you'll need to make sure that you're managing your ki levels effectively. It's always best to go into any fight making sure that you've charged up your ki enough and you're depleting your opponent's ki with things like Sonic Sway, and you're timing the use of your Z counters properly so that you're not depleting too much ki while at the same time making the most out of this ability. The ability to teleport in and out of confrontations not only lets you dodge incoming attacks, but it also keeps your opponent guessing as to where you're going to be as they attack you and you appear behind them, and you can launch a series of blows which then really turns the tide of the battle and puts the heat on them instead. Again, making sure that you remember to maintain a high ki level is important with Z counters, because if your ki is depleted, then it leaves you vulnerable as you don't have the Z counters to use. So make sure that you're managing your resources effectively in the game. Z countering can lead to a situation where there are multiple rapid fire teleportations, and whoever has the most ki is going to win in a situation like that. With enough practice, you'll be able to perfectly time your Z counters, and you'll be able to keep on top of all of your opponent's moves. So make sure you master Z counters. This is going to separate the mediocre players from the skilled ones. So a revenge counter is your go-to move for interrupting an opponent's relentless combo. By pressing the right stick when you're getting hit, you can immediately counter their attack. Now you have to be careful because this move does cost you 2 skill points, but it breaks your opponent's combo and it gives you a chance to recover or reposition yourself, especially if you're backed into a corner and you need to find a way out fast. Now you have to be very careful with revenge counters, because if you waste it, then it leaves you vulnerable for attack as you're wasting your skill points too. So you've got to time and use these effectively and know when to nullify your opponent, because revenge counters can be countered by your opponent with a perception move, so it nullifies your attempt to break free from them. So you've got to make sure that you time revenge counter properly and anticipate when your opponent might counter it with a perception. Mastering this technique can dramatically improve your defense, as it will make it difficult for opponents to overwhelm you. But again, practice is really important when it comes to revenge counters. So in order to properly time your revenge counter, you want to press down on your right analog stick with proper timing when your opponent is attacking you. In Sparking Zero, perception is essential for dealing with powerful beam attacks. Now, as long as you have 2 skill points, by holding perception, it allows you to deflect these beams and turn the tide of battle against your opponent, as you can rush in and really punish your opponents for these rush attacks. By effectively using perception, you can neutralize their attacks and disrupt their rhythm. Again, timing is everything. Well-timed perception can help you to maintain control over the battlefield, but you also need to conserve your skill points for more critical moments in the game. With things like perception, you're not just defending, you're actually forcing your opponent to do better so that they rethink their strategy and don't just spam special beam attacks against you. So yeah, this one is really great for people who aggressively rely on ki-based attacks, attacks, so make sure you practice your timing as you'll be able to deal with opponents who use beam heavy characters with ease. Another thing you're going to want to properly learn is how to evade throws from your opponent. So when they try to attempt a throw, you gotta perfectly evade it by pressing R1. So usually they try to grab you when they teleport behind you, but by effectively pressing R1 you can evade most or if not all throws. So this is again something that's often overlooked, but you gotta be able to know how to evade throws. Now the last thing that I want to go over is high speed evasion. So high speed evasion involves you timing your block the moment that your opponent attacks. Now this is again another hard one to land properly, but once it's done it gives you the opportunity to really dish out some damage once it's effectively executed. So yeah, your opponent charges the attack towards you and you effectively teleport behind them with this high speed evasion, and then that gives you an opportunity to really dish out some damage. So there you have it. These were my top 10 defensive tips for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, which are going to help to elevate your game to the next level so you can defend against some of the most annoying combos in this game, and you can effectively dish out punishment against your opponents who don't know these defensive tips themselves. Do let me know what you think about this video and if you've learned new ways to level up your skill at this game. We've covered everything from Z counters to revenge counters, as well as high speed evasion, perception, and even sonic sway. So hopefully after you've mastered all of these and practiced them in training mode, you'll be untouchable within this game. But yeah, let me know all of your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for even more Dragon Ball Sparking content just like this video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.